I mean, it's part of the anarchist philosophy. If people are starving, you don't write a letter to your congressman. The idea of direct action is that if people don't have enough food, you take it.
Welcome to The New Architects. Today we are talking about academic repression. You hear stories of students speaking out against their education systems and about the one-sided view of history that is being taught. But you never really hear about the stories and why the students speak out. So today we invited one of the editors of the book, Academic Repression, Reflections of the Academic Industrial Complex, Mr. Tony Nacella. Welcome to The New Architects, Tony.
Hi, thank you so much, Jason, for having me. So I'm really excited to talk about the book again. I've done a number of interviews, and it's going very well, sad to say, academic repression, but I'm speaking at a number of info shops and universities and just community centers about the topic of academic repression and academic freedom, and in the context of the academic industrial complex, or also coined the corporate university. And so I'm really excited to, be here today to talk about, the climate and the environment of higher education in the university system in the United States and abroad, and how it's affecting us in a democratic state.
Well, before we get into it, I mean, that sounds great, but I guess could you, before we get in the heart of the topic, can you give me the definition of what academic repression is? What is the definition of, what does that mean when you say academic repression?
That was probably the most difficult, conversations when putting the introduction, as well as just the whole mission of the book together. So, academic repression isn't just, government repression or state repression or political repression on college campuses. It's a lot more complex. So we look at academic repression from, who's doing the repression. Well, it's administration. It's fellow faculty doing it to themselves. It's staff. It's students. So the concept of academic repression is the marginalization or the silencing of voices, particular identities, so I think it's specifically those two elements that make up academic repression. And so you are being repressed because of you threaten the normalcy in higher education because of one's identity. That might be because someone is of color, international, or, for example, of disabilities. Or it's because of your specific being silenced because of your political or social beliefs or religious beliefs, or some type of belief that is quote abnormal or a threat. And so that's how I see it. And it's not through administration coming down upon the faculty only, even though the book Academic Repression had a lot of voices from academics. We can look at Kent State University as a prime example of how the administration came down upon students organizing and shooting them, in 1970. So, it's targeting, a variety of individuals. The organizing of union workers, janitors, I believe, at Syracuse University. That's a form of academic repression. So, and why is there this repression going on? Well, the silencing of particular identities and voices. That's what I also said. But it's also, becoming commonplace because of the corporate state, and how the corporate state has entrenched into the only place that you can have really free critical thought, which is higher education, the campus.
But a lot of people think that the mainstream thought that students have the freedom, to study and learn. The professors and the teachers have the freedom to teach what they want to teach. I mean, so why, they can do this without interference. So why do students and faculty feel that they're not getting what they need from the education system? I mean, why do they feel that they're being oppressed? I understand that, as you mentioned before, that, like if you can be treated different from the color of your skin if you're, disabled or, for those other reasons, but for example, the student Erica Golston, who has made waves across YouTube with her valedictorian speech, where she talks about the downfalls of the educational system. How does this book, in your view, answer the questions? Is like, well, these students and faculty have the freedoms given to all to learn and teach what they need. How can there be oppression? The valedictorian, she actually noted that she and others are slaves, part of the corporate educational system. And I think there is a lot of truth to that, right? I don't know if I would use the term slave as much as we are, because a slave doesn't buy into the system, right? And participate into it. But she was using that term to, really emphasize, use that word, to stress that we're in a climate that education is controlling us, controlling every thought and almost every idea that we have. But there is a freedom of thought and a freedom of expression that they can't take away from us. And so I would argue and challenge that we're, quote, slaves, right? We're able to leave the university. We're able to leave high school, which, as you know, anarchists do all the time. I have a number of friends that said, goodbye to high school and, traveled around the country and the continent on trains and dumpster diving. And I still see, those friends as, truly free, where I self control myself to be part of a system, so I can change it as well. So one might say, an educator is a reformist if they are part of the larger university or the educational system, right? Unless they're part of a free school, rooted in, no limits and no standardization and things of that sort. Yeah. As she says in her speech, she says the majority of students are put through the same brainwashing techniques in order to create a labor force working in the interest of the large corporations and secretive governments. And worst of all, they are completely unaware of it. I will never be able to turn back these 18 years. I can't run away to another country with an educational system meant to enlighten rather than condition. This part of my life is over, and I want to make sure that no child will ever have his or her potential suppressed by the powers meant to exploit and control. We are human beings. We are thinkers, dreamers, explorers, artists, writers, engineers. We are anything we want to be. But if we have an education system that supports us rather than hold us down, we grow. But only if its roots are given a healthy foundation. And then her speech just goes on, just kind of building on that idea. I think it's very powerful in the way she says it. And if you're listening to this podcast, you can actually go to the New Architect's website and see the video, her speech in full on there that accompanies this podcast. But I think what she says is very, very powerful. And
very powerful, I would say. Also, very, I'm not saying this in a, sometimes when we get motivated and we want to challenge, the opposition or a quote enemy, we simplify the context of the conflict. And I think the context is a lot more complicated than us being brainwashed, right? She wrote this and she, I would say in that speech is noting that she was brainwashed as well. But if that's possible, then she, was brainwashed to write that. But I think what she's trying to say is that we need to be critical thinkers like she was in that speech. And if she was able to do it, why couldn't others? It is because she was a valedictorian, and nobody else was. And at the very end of her speech, she said that she is not the only valedictorian. We all are. Yeah. And I believe that if she's able to be critical, then other students are as well. And the system is not, it's sinking, right, because the corporations and the corporate state have, begun to buy the higher education and the public educational system in general. But I don't think it's sank yet. And I think we can do a lot of great work inside and outside the educational system. And there's a lot of radicals that, teach inside and outside of the educational system, specifically inside the system. And I can name hundreds, if not thousands, of really, amazing social justice scholars. And yes, there is, marginalization or at least some control of them, but there's deans that have a strong radical social justice principle, and there is, tenured faculty at UCLA like Peter McLaren and Steve Best, and, you've got Noam Chomsky's, and you've got so many others, Joy James, Angela Davis, but I do believe that we should be challenging the system, because the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the medical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, the prison industrial complex are all making formal contracts with the academic industrial complex, and we see as well, critiquing the social justice values and saying to administration that professors need their syllabus, examined and reviewed and approved prior to the, quote, indoctrinating or propagandating their students. And so administrations are becoming, tools for these corporations to limit the criticism of these corporations.
Well, is there an example of where a corporation came in and gave funding to a school or came in and reviewed a syllabus and then had it rejected because it went against the corporation's thought or what they wanted to be taught? Is there an example where this has happened, or something similar to that?
Yeah, we have David Horowitz, who was a former leftist, now right-wing, who has his own think tank and challenges and critiques social justice scholars within higher education, and has, his think tank has paid numerous students to go in and record and sit in and collect syllabi of social justice professors. This happened at UCLA with Peter McLaren. There's numerous students in Peter McLaren's office, in his classes, that were recording and then putting on to the web his lectures, and then cutting and pasting certain sections to make it, more propagating, and rather than critical theory or critical pedagogy, which is something he teaches. And I know him very personally, and I know he allows all voices to be heard and to be respected in his class, even though he comes from a particular social justice perspective. And I think that's even better. Some professors say, I'm not going to provide my own opinion. I'm going to be objective. It's impossible to be objective about, perspectives and topics. But you can at least address your opinion or acknowledge that you do have an opinion and saying, I'm going to couch it at this time and allow all voices to be heard and become more of a facilitator than a lecturer.
Well, we hear about all the time, about leftist professors or faculty who, like back in the day when, what was it, Churchill, when Fox News and everybody was blowing up, Churchill is saying that he was pushing propaganda, anarchist propaganda, leftist propaganda. But we never hear about, even from the resistance movement, we never hear about the other side, the other professors who support, say, Christian thought, train of thought and push those values into their class. How is the academic oppression? I mean, because within all of this, we always hear about people who are trying to push forward what most would agree would be a positive train of thought, but more positive critical thinking. But we never hear about the professors and the faculties who push, the Christian thought or push more of a conservative Republican thought. Why don't we hear that, and how does that play into, the reflections of the academic-industrial complex?
I think it's clear that the conservative thought or the Republican thought, Republicans very much support the concept of corporatization of society. And this can be documented by the endorsements and the relationships of the Republican Party with corporations, and if it's banks or if it's retail or if it's military like Lockheed Martin, we see that they're endorsing it. And to make sure that they get cheap research, where's the cheapest research that Lockheed Martin and National Security Agency, CIA, DOD can find? Well, it's graduate students. So they have reserved contracts with numerous amount of universities in going about building this relationship. Well, not only are they doing this, this research on campuses, but they're also at the same time recruiting future employees that they already know, they trust, and that have the same agenda or ideology. And I think that's why they are not being challenged, is because most universities, if not all universities today, are very much entrenched in the corporatization of higher education. To keep a university going, you have to have a huge amount of money. You have to pay faculty, staff. You have to keep up the facilities. You have to have supplies. And this doesn't only come because of alumni donating, because these alumni now from the 1980s, early 1980s to currently are now in debt. And so when you get a undergrad from any university, unless you're on a scholarship or have a wonderful financial package, you are averaging $100,000 in debt from an undergraduate degree. So this is not possible that an undergrad that's already $100,000 in debt is going to be giving back. So they have to find the revenue to keep their campus alive and working from another source. And this source is from corporations.
Well, isn't also that the corporations want the students to exit the educational system in tremendous amount of debt because it keeps them working and it keeps them in debt to the corporations? That's why they're going in and say, okay, we're going to pick this employee, and this employee to come work for us straight out of school. They're going to be hardcore loyal students because they're in debt and they can't quit work. They can't resist work, what's being told to them, because they have multi-$1,000s in debt to their university, or so it's kind of it's kind of a win-win for the university and the corporations.
Yeah, the university, has sold their debt, this debt that students have to banks, and then banks say, yeah, we'll take it, and then instead of 3%, we'll put it at 5%, and then we'll make money off these. So, the financial industrial complex has has a perfect and direct interest in making sure that students continue to go in debt, right? And so, there's not too many nonprofits that are paying the same as Lockheed Martin or any other corporation, right? Wells Fargo, et cetera. So to get out of debt in one's lifetime, they have to basically sell themselves, as the valedictorian said, and continue to become enslaved in the system, self-enslaving, to keep on, running on this treadmill that's not going anywhere. And so I think there's that dilemma. But every single part, if it's meant to be that way, and somebody thought this up, or it's just become this way because the campuses are becoming too large for their sustainability, and so they can't sustain themselves on their own. So now they have to find external support.
So, is the concept of academic freedom, does it still exist in the American university system?
I put it to press in the book proposal at the very beginning. I said, and that's the reason why they gave us the book proposal, the book contract to make this book. And there has never been a book on academic repression. And so we said, no, academic freedom is gone, and beyond just being attacked by the elite in academia as well as the out, that we need to capture every element of academic freedom or critical thought. And I think there is critical thought. I don't know if there's academic freedom. And the difference between critical thought is that you can challenge and you can provide space and place for voices that challenge dominant perspectives and ideologies. Well, academic freedom allows it to be everywhere, anywhere. And I don't believe that's so. Organizing as a student, be it if you're an undergrad or graduate, it has to be approved. Many campuses force you to first be a recognized student organization. And if you are a recognized student organization, you have to pay a certain fee to the Student Government Association. And then if you want to put on an event on campus, then it has to be approved sometimes by public safety, which now public safety on many campuses, many public universities, have holding cells, bulletproof jackets, a multitude of weapons, from pepper spray to tear gas to semi-automatic weapons.
Are these licensed police officers, or are they like security guards?
Well, that's it's diverse. So you have Wackahut on some campuses, while at other, which Wackahut is a private security agency or security corporation, and while on others they have retired and current police forces, which, for instance, if you possibly went to a university, you possibly could see a off-duty or on-duty now on the campus, but an off-duty city police officer. For instance, at Syracuse University, there are a number of off-duty police officers or retired police officers that work there. So, and there's a strong relationship between the two. You can look at a numerous amount of campuses from California to New York and see that there's on almost every single campus building, there's cameras. And there's horns on the top of them that provide alerts if there was a shooting like what happened in Virginia Tech. And I think the shooting at Virginia Tech, the shootings at Columbine, the shootings at University of Texas, many of these violent acts have been, been launching pads to justify a police state in higher education. And if there is a particular physical control of the campus by, police officers or public safety or peace officers, as they also are called,
so you're
then,
saying
then not only does it control physically the campus, but administration also controls the intellect and the ideas that go on. So, the campus is under lockdown.
So you're saying this is similar to how, but on a grander scale, and similar how federal agents send in, moles or whatever, undercover people to go into certain groups to gather information, to gather what they're planning, how they're planning it, where they're setting up, who are the leaders and whatever. You're saying in that same kind of concept, they're doing that to the American educational system. They're going into the universities and the colleges, and they're having a strong police state presence, and they're also controlling who can have a group, who can't, and that way they can monitor the activities to see if there's going to be any, unsavory type thought or words or, ideologies being spread. Whatever that may be, whether it's,
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the website or the page, that is, but the FBI has put together a committee of deans and provosts all over the United States to secure and protect, higher education from threats. And part of the committee's goal is to provide free access to writings and emails and offices, etc. So we can have national security, and some of the terrorists identified by the FBI and the U.S. government and international governments have gone to Ivy League schools, have gone to Harvard, and but they also have been part of the U.S. military as well. I mean, we can see that with the bombing, the Oklahoma bombing. So we need to not just focus on intellectuals as being a possible threat, but we also need to look at society, and you can't just narrow it down onto critical thinkers being wanting to be revolutionaries or terrorists, and to control higher education in that manner. You're forcing somebody to react in an aggressive way. If you take one's freedom away, then they're going to do whatever they need to do to survive. And I think we need to protect higher education and provide spaces and places for critical thought. And I think there's a lot of campuses that do so, but they're in a tug of war with themselves. That they don't want to go bankrupt, like if you look at the SUNY system, which is the largest system in the United States, the State University of New York. They were cut by the state of New York $90 million. So they have a freeze for the next few years on hiring any new faculty. They actually cut thousands of lines of faculty. Now numbers of faculty are actually forced to work more classes and more labor, and the administration and the staff are forced to do more work as well. And who doesn't benefit in this? No one benefits, but the students, of course, are paying more, but then getting less, because instead of a class averaging 19 students, it's now averaging 36 students, or 40 students, or 250 students, and it's becoming a factory. And what is this factory producing? Well, it's producing the future labor force to be a cog in a large machine. And but that cog, is not going to be a cog if they're not in debt. So to force that, cog or that student to be playing the corporate game, they have to be in debt, as you were noting before. And as the valedictorian that provided that very critical speech, noted as well.
Yeah. So, with all this at our feet, with all this information, with all this strange, bizarro world of the educational system, what can people do to help point it in the right direction and make real change, make real strides to improve this? What can people do?
Well, first, don't simplify higher education so simply that the corporate state has taken over and has won. I think that universities in general want to be places and are microcosms of larger societies. But to be that, they need to figure out ethical, financial support. And they also have to figure out that the campuses, possibly like society, which anarchists might argue, is that they need to be smaller to be sustainable. But now you have State University of New York, that is taking care of hundreds of thousands of students a year, servicing, one might say. University of Texas, which has a campus at Austin, Dallas, Arlington, I believe in Galveston, El Paso. The list goes on, and I think the campuses need to be smaller. And if the campuses are smaller, then the classes will be smaller. And if the classes are smaller, then there's going to be smaller departments. Then we'll be going back to the liberal arts. And the liberal arts smaller campuses will then be a lot more sustainable, hopefully, and rather than looking at massive amount of research and keeping corporate research out of the university. And I think that's one thing to do. But having more dialogues about the state of education in the U.S. And across the world, I think that's really important, because if you don't have affordable education in the U.S., you don't have democracy. And what I mean by this is that democracy is only possible with an educated population of citizens. And if you have ignorant citizens and citizens that are not able to be informed about critical issues and important issues to vote on, then they won't vote. And we already know that the U.S. has a very low voting turnout for instance, the president. And I think that's a major dilemma. So if you keep on increasing the price of a particular product, that makes that product unaffordable. And, more and more individuals will look at that product as not worth it. And they will look at alternatives, and then what will happen will be there will be a huge gap, which already exists, between the very, very rich, the elite that run these corporations, because it's not these, corporations are run by people. And that these elite individuals running these corporations will, have a huge more amount of money, and the poor will be poorer, and there won't be a middle class.
And for anybody who wants to learn more about this subject, you can pick up Anthony's book, Academic Repression, Reflection from the Academic Industrial Complex. You can find it at AK Press and many other fine bookstores.
And just in closing, I noted, there.
Yeah.
I mentioned, a few minutes ago about the FBI's academic committee, and it's on the website. And if you looked up National Security Higher Education Advisory Board, you would find it. And you can just Google it. And they have a press release that they were meeting in February, and it was comprised of 19 university presidents and chancellors to look at the state of higher education in relation to the protection of campuses. And one note, and I think you would probably be very interested in, is, I'll read this really quick. Special Agent Kevin Golnod, I'm possibly pronouncing it wrong, FBI Washington Field Office, and Assistant United States Attorney William Mackey, Eastern Director of Tennessee's, presented a case study on Dr. Reese Ross, a former University of Tennessee professor convicted and violating export control laws. Attendees also received a briefing on animal rights extremists and environmental extremism from the Domestic Terrorism Analysis Unit. And then it just keeps on going. The meeting concluded with a panel discussion on issues affecting academics overseas travel. And so I thought that was really important to note that at this committee on higher education in relation to the national security, animal rights extremism and environmental extremism was brought up, and how that relates to higher education. And we can see that because environmentalism and animal rights challenges the current medical industrial complex and pharmaceutical industrial complex, which tests on animals. And one industry that tests on more animals than any other is the academic industrial complex. We can see the testing of vivisection and dissection on almost every single campus in the United States. And that reinforces a particular type of education, which is unethical in my opinion. And but there are alternatives being developed, Baylor and many others, and we need to praise those campuses that are providing ethical alternative research.
Well, how can students fight the pharmaceuticals from coming in and the government's giving schools billion-dollar grants, million-dollar grants to do these animal tests? I guess you can do your protesting and you can do your letter writing campaigns, but how do we really? I mean, because there's been great strides over the years about vivisectors stepping down from universities because of once they're exposed of the cruelties inherently involved with vivisection. But what can individuals do on their campus to help?
I would say alumni can earmark their money not going towards the biology department or chemistry department or psychology department that tests on non-human animals. And that's one thing the alumni could do beyond just writing to the president and the provost and the dean. The students, can just advocate for classes, because if there's so many classes on the message as well as the practice of testing on animals and dissecting them and vivisecting them, then there needs to be some classes in sociology, philosophy, anthropology, economics on the ethics of the ethical treatment towards non-human animals. And so I think students who are customers need to demand that there are critical animal studies classes and centers and programs and degrees And so when there becomes this, I think there will be more and more of a push towards ethical treatment towards animals in higher education. And I think that's one element of academic repression as well. I mean, we talk about humans being targeted towards academic repression, but, thousands of animals, all over the United States are being tortured, if not tens of thousands or more a day, for quote, education, and we know that, much of this education is actually uneducation, or it's misinformation, and but it's supported by more misinformation over the years, and I think that we need to inform ourselves and become critical in saying that even though that many of these researchers and professors are paid directly to do this research by corporations, that we can't take the money, and that it's not ethical, as well as it's not pushing us towards a better understanding of biology, psychology, and chemistry, for instance.
Is there a university in North America that does have a excellent or improving critical animal studies course, or one that is pushing the envelope on trying to get true sense of critical animal studies?
There's a number of classes out there, but the only program that I know of is at Brock University in St. Catharines, on the border. It's in Canada, and they provide a certificate, I believe a minor, and it was created in, I believe, 2007. And there are psychologists and faculty that try to silence critical animal studies on that campus, but there's a lot of excellent faculty that that don't marginalize themselves and don't galvanize themselves, and become very welcome into debates and dialogues in moving higher education to an ethical place. So Brock University is one place that students can check out.
Very nice. Is there a website that people who want to know more about critical animal studies can go to?
Sure. Well, if you Google critical animal studies, you would find an organization that I'm involved in, and it's called the Institute for Critical Animal Studies. And it's a critical organization challenging, animal studies as well as animal research in higher education and beyond, and the treatment towards non-human animals. And so the website is criticalanimalstudies.org.
There's one thing I want listeners to take away from this program. I know that there's a lot of overwhelming negative stuff that you hear happening within the academic industrial complex. But just as the example of the school that you were just talking about that offers the critical animal study courses, the key thing that each individual and group can do is to work in their small community to improve it day by day. Whether you're faced with, the vivisections on your campus, or you're faced with, whatever it may be, whether it's oppression of, because of your skin, because of your abilities, or, of a non-human species. I guess the key is that each individual and group should fight every day to try to improve the conditions that they see are wrong. And I think that overall, over time, it's just chipping at the stone, but over time it's going to improve. If we can keep pumping out people like Erica Golson, who did the valedictorian at high school speech, if we can keep doing that, she was 18 years old, and she's already reached this point. When she's 25, when she's 30, hopefully she still has this fire and this clarity within her that she inspires more people to take a look at what is being taught to them, to take a look at what's happening to them around the world. I think that's really what's important. People need to take the time to realize there's some really messed up things going on, and it's going on handed down to us by the government. It's handed down to us from our educational systems, from our teachers, from our friends, from, sometimes even our family. And in our heart, we know when things are wrong, and we need to fight every day to change those things. Whether it's against academic repression or just any other repression that happens to us in our daily lives. Together as a community, we can do this. And I want to thank Anthony for taking the time out and speaking with us tonight with the New Architects. And please, everybody go to AK Press and pick up his book, Academic Repressions, Reflections of the Academic Industrial Complex. Do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the comments and a continued dialogue on the state of higher education in the United States and abroad. And we need to protect our education to keep our democracy. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. Everyone have a good night.